Thank you very much. So if we could all start by scanning this QR code, because I have a few questions for you. I know all of you get to know more about the speakers, but now I'd like to know more about the participants. And unlike Antoine, I'm not going to make you stand up because I'm lazy, and I assume other people are too. So is this working, the QR code? You all in? Very good. Okay, so I'll give you a little bit more time, and then we will start with the questions. I also noticed this is a very good audio device, so I have to make sure that I'm not speaking loudly, which I do by nature, especially because I see people. So if I'm speaking too loudly, please, I don't know, gesticulate somehow that I should be a little bit more quiet. Okay, are we ready? Is there anybody else who's not ready? All right, let's do it. Let's do it. So let's start with an easy one. You already know where I'm from. Well, you actually only partially know where I'm from because I do live in Israel, but you can maybe tell by the accent that I wasn't born there. I'm from the United States. I also lived for a bit in London, so sometimes I use funny words like rubbish and bin, things like that. My husband's British. Oh, this is cool. Oh, we have a lot of people here from Macedonia. Yeah. Yeah. Am I assuming that here means Amsterdam, I guess? Oh, here we have a dog. Oh, we have a lot of different places here. That's cool. All right, let's keep going. Next question for you. How long have you been a developer? I'm not going to ask you by iOS version, but instead of you guys not seeing what everybody's answer are, now we'll all know what the makeup is here. Wow, we've got a lot of 10-plus year developers. And some newbies. That's great. Very cool. Very cool. So we have a pretty even split between semi-experienced, very experienced, and dinosaurs, and then new people. Okay. Next question. This is just curiosity for me. You can check multiple answers here. So I think other people would be curious to know what kind of tech stacks everybody's using. So let's see what we got. Why is this showing percentage? That's annoying. I see y'all are loving the emojis there. Okay, yeah, core Bluetooth, and if anybody wonders why I asked that, because I actually submitted 2 talks, and the other one was about core Bluetooth, and I was wondering how many people are really interested in hearing that, because if you're using it, then it's not interesting to you because you know it already, and if you're not, maybe you don't care about it. So I figured this talk is really applicable to everybody, but maybe we'll do core Bluetooth another time. So we see that Swift is a big winner over here. A lot of people still using UIKit. Swift UI is pretty big too. Objective-C, yeah, cool, okay. And last question, what are your thoughts about management? When I talk about management, I mean as a people manager, not as a lead developer who doesn't have direct reports. A real people manager who has to listen to complaints and approve vacation days and salary bumps and fire people, one of those kind of managers. Okay, all right, so I think we are about ready to start the talk. This is very interesting to see who here is in the audience. So we have some people considering it. I hope that I'll give you some insights. I like the candor of no way, never, and also the people who have been there and back. And so we're gonna cover all of these topics today in the talk. Okay, so I want it all, the Mythical Hands-On Manager. I'm not sure which book Jeroen was referring to, perhaps the Mythical Man Month. I'm not talking about that. And let's get to it. So first of all, traditionally people like to thank at the end, but I would like to open this talk by thanking everybody who was instrumental in organizing this conference. Jeroen, Bart, Yolanda, Marco, and the sponsors, Stream and Firebase. And especially to all you guys, to all you attendees, because if there weren't people, then there wouldn't be a conference. So I want to thank you all. Okay. So here's a question. What's in common between Santa Claus, the Tooth Fairy, and hands-on managers? They're all fake. Very good. So you can kind of get the gist of what I'm going to talk about today. Let's get to it. So today's agenda is, first of all, why am I giving this talk? Next, we're going to talk about management, what it is, what it isn't, and hands-on, what does hands-on mean, and just some general insights of mine that I've amassed over my vast years. So we could start with, why am I giving this talk? Why do I feel myself qualified? So who am I? My name is Leah Vogel. As I said, I live in Israel. I'm a senior engineering manager at Chegg. Senior engineering manager at Chegg means that I manage managers. I'm fairly new to this position. I've been in it for about 6 months, and previously I was an engineering manager for a while, and we'll get to the other things I've done. Why do I write iOS developer at heart? Because I feel deceitful to say I'm currently an iOS developer. I haven't written a line of code in over a year, but this is who I identify with. You guys are my people. I am a speaker, writer, reader. I read all kinds of strange things. I really like sci-fi and fantasy. I just finished one of Brandon Sanderson's books. I just read Ken Follett's new book. I like to read a lot of things, so the picture behind me is a very small part of a large bookcase that I have at my house. All right, so let's start with a little bit of history about me. So as Jeroen mentioned, yes, I did start out as a teacher, but I'm going to start from my tech side. So my tech side, about 10 years ago, I made the transition into tech. I did have a little bit of ancient background. I wrote my first program on a TI 99.4a. Does anybody know what that is? Yay, okay, so my father used to work at Texas Instruments. I actually grew up in Austin, Texas, and all my friends had Commodore 64s or Ataris, and I wanted a computer. I wanted to play games, so I asked my father to bring one home, and he brought home a computer, and I said, where are the games? He said, if you want games, you have to write them. I said, I don't know what that means. So at my grand old age of 6, I learned how to code in BASIC, and I would write like choose your own adventure games. It was a lot of fun. I wasn't a child code prodigy. I didn't continue in that area until I was much, much older. And when I say much, much older, to the point of when I interviewed for the coding course I took, I was asked my age, because he said, if you're 40 already, we will not accept you to the course because nobody will hire you. So I was very close, though. Okay, so I started out my career, my very first job as a junior iOS developer. I knew nothing. The course that I took, it was supposed to be general app development, so it was Android and iOS. I would say it was about 90% Android, about 10% iOS. My instructor disliked iOS, and he would diss Apple at every opportunity and say what a horrible place they are, and you're never going to get a job working in iOS code. And so it was like, okay, we just can ignore this part because we're all going to be Android developers. That's not the case. Actually, my first job was an iOS job. I can't believe they accepted me, really. I thought I bombed that interview, but they did. And I had a very supportive network of people around me. My first team leader, he was great. He was very helpful, and I wrote, I think, my first alert in production code like after a week, and I'm like, wow, I've got an alert inside production. It was amazing. But really, really very little and very unsure of myself. Took a while to get my footing. But as things progressed along and I started gaining more knowledge, actually we had a lot of core data in that code base, and at some point I actually knew how to write it. And yeah, so blossoming a little bit until I considered myself, okay, I think we can drop the junior. I want to tell you that at my age, to be called a junior is really funny. So when they would introduce people, it's like, okay, this is our junior developer, and here I'm the oldest person in the entire company, but okay, I'll roll with it. So finally, I was, one of the team. I was actually contributing major features. It was a wonderful startup. I'm actually wearing their sweatshirt today, coincidentally. It was a company called Glide, a little startup in Jerusalem that worked on a video messaging application before video messaging was really a thing. And I don't know if anybody here is familiar with Glide. Anybody? No. Okay. Well, we did at some point have millions of users. We also had some big competition come in, like Snapchat, that kind of swallowed us. But it was really fun to work on it. And then the company did a little bit of a pivot and decided to go into some hardware as well. And they developed a band for the Apple Watch called the wrist cam. Has anybody heard of the wrist cam? All right, so it is actually a watch for the Apple, a band for the Apple Watch that has 2 cameras on it, front-facing and rear-facing, and I got to work a lot on that product. It was supposed to launch in 2016. I think it launched earlier this year, which is one of the reasons that the company didn't survive as well as it could have. But yeah, so I was shifted to work on that product, and we restructured the teams a little bit in the company to something called feature teams. That's what we called it, but it basically was like multidisciplinary squads. So in each squad, we were focused on a certain area of development, and in the squads we had Android engineer, iOS, server, design, QA, BI, all the different functions in one team, and I was asked to be a feature team lead, which was fun. So aside from doing my own work, I had to make sure everybody else was doing their work too. So that was my first little mini foray of management inside of the tech realm. And really, I love this startup. I was there for 4 years, and I think I would have continued working there forever, except what happens to a lot of startups is that they crumble, and then they lay everybody off, or all kinds of things like that, and all of a sudden, I found myself asking, uh-oh, what is next? What am I going to do? I got this terrible lump in my stomach of, this is my first job. Am I going to be able to find another one? Maybe all the stuff I know is just imaginative. You know, Jeremy talked about imposter syndrome. I had major imposter syndrome, like maybe I really don't know anything. And I didn't know what I should do next. Also, because in my line of work, there were things that I really enjoyed. I really enjoyed writing code. You could sit me in a room, not talk to any other humans for the entire day. I could probably sit 13, 14 hours a day and just write code. I loved it. On the other hand, I also loved working with the people. That whole little issue with the feature teams kind of give me an insight of, well, maybe I'd like to try out management. I don't know. And then I was thinking, you know what? I didn't start in tech. I started out as a teacher. I taught math. I taught English as a foreign language. I loved teaching. I thought I was going to be a teacher forever. That was my lifetime dream since the time I was a little girl. You know, what do you want to be when you grow up? The answer was a teacher. Why did I ever leave teaching? It's kind of a long story. When I married my husband, I moved to London, then we moved back to Israel, and then the school wanted to rehire me, but then I had a baby, and so I didn't go back to teaching right away. And then I wound up working in a nonprofit, which I thought would be a very temporary job for just, I don't know, a few months. A few months turned into 8 years. And after 8 years, and I wasn't really happy there anymore, I got a little pop-up on my computer screen, and it said, you know, are you interested in a course in QA? Really random pop-up. And I'm like, I don't know, maybe. So I kind of put my details in there and forgot about it, but they called me an hour later, and that's how I got into the course. But aside from having many years of experience in a classroom, which is a type of management, and many years of experience in the nonprofit where I was a project manager, not a product manager. I've never been a product manager. That's not going to be on my resume ever. Not because I don't respect them, because I'm terrible at it. But with regards to managing, so here I had managed all these people leading other projects. And aside from that, I have 6 children. Now, 6 children is nothing to sneeze at. And let me tell you, that requires a lot of management skills. So I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute. I think I'm very qualified to do a lot of things. So I hope the audio is not going to be too loud here. But all of a sudden, I had this thought. And here was my thought. Manager, which is really, really what I thought my dream job would be. So I started working at a company, very interesting company called Orcam in Jerusalem that develops smart wearable technology for people with disabilities, like for visually impaired, audio impaired, etc. Actually, I didn't even explain what Chegg does. What my current company, Chegg, is a combination of the words chicken and egg. It's an educational technology company and does all sorts of things for students on every step of their educational journey. But back to Orcam. So they had a very small mobile department. When I say small, I say 2 people. And I came in there as 2 people aside from me. There was one Android developer and one iOS developer. So I came in there to be the iOS team lead. So that picture over there, that's me. So I am the iOS team lead with my big team of 1. And that was really good. That's, you got to start somewhere. And then it evolved a little bit more, because after a few weeks, my manager figured probably that's a little bit inefficient. Why do we need one person managing one person? You can manage the Android developer too. What's the big deal, right? Okay, so then I became, instead of the iOS team lead, I was now the mobile team lead. So I had a big team of 2. And then it grew. Well, we grew. The company needs grew. We had more apps that we need to develop. There were more devices to support. So all of a sudden, I had a lot more work than I started with. I was writing core features of the app, hence the Bluetooth. We used to communicate with the devices via Bluetooth, so I had a lot of good Bluetooth experience over there. And all these people that you see over here, they are all juniors. All juniors. So me being the most senior developer, I had a lot of mentoring to do, but I also had to write a lot of code. And this became the Android team lead, and she led the team of Android. So I was now the iOS team lead, the mobile team lead, so I had managed a manager, managed a team, and it was really a lot of work. And I was finding that I had a lot more stress than I had initially, and I wasn't quite sure how things were going to go, because when I envisioned this position, this was the dream job. I was going to be Superwoman. I was going to do it all. I was going to write the code, I was going to manage the people, and I was going to have a great time doing it. But instead, I was a horrific beast. I was not a human, and I was not an animal. I didn't know what was on. I didn't know what I should do. Like, something's got to give. You can't do it all. So it led me to the question of, what is my job? What is really expected of me? What is my position here? Am I really supposed to be writing more code? Am I supposed to be spending more time on management? What am I supposed to be doing? So now we're going to talk a little bit more about management, what actually management means. And I want to make a distinction between management and leadership, because when I'm saying management, I'm referring specifically to people management. Because I think leadership is something that everybody can do in any position, as an individual contributor, any place you are in the ladder, you can definitely be a leader. Leadership does not mean that you need a title to do that. But I'm talking about people management. So some people think this is what my manager does all day. All they do is schedule tasks and meetings. And that's maybe what they do. That's what I did when I was a feature team lead. I wasn't really a manager, but that's what I did. I made sure everybody was doing their tasks. I had to update Jira. I had to make sure that the workload was all there, and I was in lots of meetings. But that's not really all a manager does. Surprise, surprise. So that was the iceberg. That's just the tip of the iceberg, as we say, because a manager has a lot of different responsibilities. Amongst them, tasks, yes, tasks are part of the responsibilities, but there's a lot of other things that you have to do too. And being a manager for the first time, you kind of just are trying to keep your head above the water and not drown and get everything done. And really it is at the beginning all about tasks and all about making sure that your people have what to do. But once you get to the next level of management, you're like, hey, I got to grow my team. I'm responsible for the professional growth of the people that I manage. There's a lot more to it than just task management. So being that, it made me rethink a few things. So first of all, why do engineers even become managers? Why do they want to do that? Some people will say here, they don't want to do that, as we saw before. But there are those that do. So why do engineers want to become managers? Well, one reason is they want power. They want prestige. They want the ability to control the roadmap and drive what other people are doing. That's a reason. Another reason is, well, they're the most senior person on the team. So when it's time to make somebody a manager, well, you've been here for 6 years, you're going to be the manager now. Or in smaller startups, you've been here for 6 months, you're going to be the manager now. So, whatever it is. But sometimes that's the reason why somebody becomes a manager. Actually, at my first position, my very first manager, he became the manager because he was the most senior. So they said to him, hey, you're now managing this team. He's like, okay. He hated it. He hated managing it, but because he was the senior, they figured that they have to offer it to him. And he was smart enough at some point to say, I hate this, and somebody else became the manager, and he went back to just being an individual contributor. Another reason people become managers is because they're the most skilled person on the team. So that's a great thing to do, right? Take the person who has the best coding skills and make them do other skills. How many people here have a manager that became the manager because they were the best at the code? Anybody have any here? Okay. Now, can you be candid? Are they a good manager? No. okay? No. My manager at the second company, he was brilliant. He was so talented. He was a horrible manager. Great person, horrible manager. This is a good reason to become manager, right? That's where money is. You want money, become a manager. Unfortunately, if that's the case, you have to rethink the company that you're living at. I hope you're not living at your company, sorry. That you're working at. That reminds me, I asked somebody like towards the beginning of COVID, I said, what's the work from home policy at your company? He's like, work from home? I live in the office. So I hope that that's not the case for most people. But if the only reason that you want to go into management is because that's where more money is, you need to rethink if your company has a better path. If that is the only path forward in your company, then I can understand why, that has to be the next step because that's all there is. We're going to get more into that later. Another reason people become managers is because they love people and they want to manage. And if there's one thing that you take away from this talk, that is the only reason to become a manager. If you don't love people, don't become a manager. Okay? You got to really love people because you got to be with them in the good times and the not so great times. You want to have to enjoy what you do every day. So that's a really important one. Now, why would a company want to take a developer and turn them into a hands-on manager? That answer is simple. That's to cut costs. That way they don't have to hire another person. That makes sense. And sometimes a position like that does make sense, but not always. So we talk about development life cycle, but how about the developer life cycle? So is this the developer life cycle? Is this inevitable? Does a person go between a junior, a mid, a senior, and then they have to become a people manager? And the answer is absolutely no. First of all, this is how most of us start out. I don't think anybody is born a senior developer, so we all start somewhere. Then junior, then mid, and then senior. And then at some point, the tracks split. So you can either continue on the IC track, IC is individual contributor, and there are more steps to the ladder there, or you can go to the management track. And this can also continue towards CTO, et cetera. I've seen diagrams like this that have the IC track also can become a CTO. Sure, why not? A CTO isn't a people manager, right? So everybody can choose their path. And I want to make something very clear here. No one has to ever leave that box. If you're happy being a senior developer and you love it, you don't have to do anything else. My father retired at the age of 72 as a senior software engineer. Not because he couldn't get promoted, because that's what he loved doing. So keep that in mind for all you people who really love your job and don't want to do anything else. You don't have to. All right. So if you take a senior developer and you say, hey, you're the manager now, that's possibly going to have some backlash. So first of all, you're probably going to lose a developer if the team is big enough because then you don't have time to sit and write the code. So there goes the developer. I want to talk for a minute about the Peter Principle. Is anybody here familiar with the Peter Principle? Okay, a few people. So basically the Peter Principle says that a person is promoted until their level of incompetence. What does that mean? So if we take the best developer who has great development skills and say, okay, now you're a manager. Now, management and development don't have the same skills. So all of a sudden, they came from being perfectly competent and great at what they were doing to a skill set that they may or may not be good at. And let's say they are good at, and then, okay, so they take and then they promote them to the next level. I know in our company, the expectations between a senior engineer and a staff engineer are very different. Staff engineer is expected to do things that are a lot broader across the company, requires a lot more collaboration and communication with teams overseas, and it's not a position for everybody. I know that there's somebody in our team, very experienced, that potentially could be a staff engineer, not interested in that other kind of job. And I really respect when people realize that I like what I do. I don't necessarily want to do the other thing. Okay, let's talk about hands-on. What is hands-on management anyway? So back when I worked in the startup in Glide, so we were preparing to launch our product. We were making a major update, and our CEO came out and he spoke to the company. We had a big all hands. When I say big, it was a little company, but big all hands. And he says, okay, so with this next release, our mission is to touch thousands of college students. And everybody's like, that didn't come out very good now, did it? That's a strange mission for a company. So when I was floating the idea of this talk to my mother, she's like, no manager should be hands-on without consent. So I'm not talking about that kind of hands-on. I'm talking about actually writing code. So what does this mean? So if you're considering a position of being a hands-on manager, you need to get the expectations very clear. What does that mean? What type? What is the expectation there? I mean, when I came into that second company and I was responsible for one other engineer, it made perfect sense for me to be continuing to be a very active contributor to the code base. Because why not? What else would I be doing with my time anyway? I got one guy, you know? It's funny, it was a really tall guy actually. We had standing desks there, and as you notice, I'm a little vertically challenged. So he had his computer up here, and his screens were up there, and he would come ask for help, and I'm like, are you serious? Do you think I can see your code up there? I need binoculars. So yeah, when you have a very small team, maybe it does make sense. Maybe it does make sense. But when your team starts to grow and you have, I would say once you have 4 people, you really have to ask yourself and say, am I really going to have time to write code? And if the answer is yes, I think you should ask yourself, why? What is the expectation of me as a manager? Am I doing the manager things correctly? Because there's a lot of gray area of what the expectations are of a manager. When you think about an engineer, when you hire an engineer, you've got tasks. This is the feature. This is what needs to get done. The deliverables, it's all very clear. But when you have expectations of a manager, okay, manage the team. What does that mean? I actually had the wonderful privilege of mentoring 4 brand new engineering managers. So what happened is we had a little bit of restructuring in the company that I work at because my manager left, and I was one of the engineering managers of 4 squads, and I was asked to step up and lead the other squads. Now, in the other engineering managers there, one of them left the company. Another one went to back-end engineering. Another one was promoted to a different position. So there are all of a sudden 4 squads with no engineering managers. So one of the first things I did when I sat down with my new managers is define my expectations of them. It's very important that a manager knows what they need to do. And then, of these 4, there were 2 who had questions about hands-on. 2 were very happy to never write code again. They were great at what they did. They don't want to do it anymore. That's it. One of them said, you know what? As an iOS developer, I have to learn a whole new language every single year. I don't want to do it anymore. Okay, I respect that. And he's very happy. He's got a big team. He manages his team, and that's fine. I have another one who says, you know, I really, really want to keep writing code. Okay, so we'll work that out. We'll see how to make that happen. So I don't know how many people get this reference. Raise your hand if you do. Oh, okay. So there are people that may be close to my age. Anyway, this is from Short Circuit. That's Johnny 5. And I really think that, again, if one is considering doing the hands-on management, you need a lot more information before you can make the decision if it makes sense or not. Don't assume that you know what the company is asking of you in order to make that decision. Okay, so here I have some more thoughts. So first of all, is becoming a manager a promotion? Yes or no? Raise your hand if you think yes. Raise your hand if you think no. Okay, good, because it's not a promotion. It kind of is, you know, you're promoted as a manager, it's a new position, but it's really a whole different career. As we saw at the junction, you know, when you make your decision if you want to go to the management path or the IC path, it's really a different career. Okay, so if you are considering, after all this, becoming a hands-on manager, ask yourself this question. First of all, why do you want to manage people? If you do not have a good answer to that, do not continue to the next question. Next question would be, how important is developing to you? If it is very important, then maybe you want to consider a position where you have a small team. If it's not so important to you, roll with it. Will you have time to grow your people? If you're spending your time writing code, it's really your responsibility to grow the skills of those around you. And if you're focused heads down on what you need to get done, you're not going to really have time to see what they're up to. And will you have time to grow yourself? Because depending on what path you choose, you still want to improve your own skills. You know, management isn't something that, you don't wake up being a senior developer, you don't wake up being a good manager. There are people who have innate skills that make them better at certain parts of management, but there's a lot of things that you have to learn. And if you're going to be busy writing code all day, are you going to have any time to reflect and think of yourself to grow as a person? Now, if you're a company and you're saying, hey, we have a spot in this team, we need a manager, let's get a hands-on manager. That's great that we get kill two birds with one stone, right? And I'm going to stress the word kill. We're going to kill two birds with one stone. Let's not kill the manager. So first of all, as a company, do you have a career ladder? Do the people in your company know their opportunities to advance to the next level? Do they know that they have the option of becoming, I don't know, a staff engineer? Do they know that they have other options and that they're not forced to become a hands-on engineer? Another question is, what are the needs of the team? Some teams need a lot of hand-holding. Some teams don't need as much. Even the teams don't need as much, they're still going to need times for growth. But what are the needs? If it's a very needy team that needs a lot of, there's a lot of conflict, or they need a lot more culture building, etc., does it make sense to have the expectation that their manager is going to be writing code? What are the needs of the manager? When you hire somebody, ask them what they want. What do they want out of their career? Do they want to be hands-on? Do they not want to be hands-on? When I interviewed for my job at Chegg, I asked my manager, I said, is there an expectation to be hands-on? She says, that's entirely up to you. The team doesn't need it. There are enough developers on the team, but if it's something that you want to do, go for it. Does the position make sense? Sometimes hands-on management does make a lot of sense. Again, if there's a team of 2 people, all right, makes sense. Okay. All boils down to expectations. Expectations, expectations, expectations. I cannot stress that word enough. I actually gave a talk 2 weeks ago in Israel, and that was the title of my talk, was called Great Expectations. I don't know if there's another word that is as important. I don't know, not just in this industry, but in life. That so many times when we get that feeling of disappointment or anger or upset, it's a lack of expectations from the other side. So here, when you're considering hands-on management, you've got to be very clear about what you want. Okay, this is supposed to be a pendulum. Anybody read the article by Charity Majors? Anybody familiar with that? Okay, so Charity, she's the CEO of a company called Honeycomb.io, and she writes a lot of stuff. She's very interesting, and one of the things she writes about is, well, what happens? So you became a manager, and now you don't like it anymore. If you remember the questions at the beginning, there were people in this room who were a manager and are not a manager anymore. They decided, hey, I don't like this. I'm going to go back to being an IC. That is perfectly okay. There are a lot of people who are afraid to take the step of trying management because they're worried they're going to get stuck there forever. You don't have to get stuck anywhere forever at any position and any job. I mean, look at me. I'm not a teacher anymore. Not that I felt stuck there, but again, you go to any position you want. So if you decide that you want to take the leap and try out management, you don't have to feel like it's a lifetime commitment because you can always go back to being an IC. So she maintains, so she calls this the pendulum, one time this, one time that, but never both at the same time. She is also strongly opposed to the hands-on management idea because it's really hard to be very good at both things simultaneously. Doesn't mean you can't be good at both things, but it's really hard to do both at once. So another approach might be, instead of being hands-on management, how about hands-warm management? Just because you become a manager doesn't mean you have to lose your technical skills. There are many things that you can do to keep your skills alive. So here are some ideas. Code review. Reading code, reading other people's code, is a wonderful tool to keep yourself in the industry. So I hear all these talks, wonderful things about async await and about combine, about Swift UI, a bunch of technologies that I admit I have not written at all. But I have read a lot of code of the team. So even when people are presenting, I understand what's going on because I've kept my hands warm by code review, by reading articles and stuff. Architecture. Being active in architecture decisions is also a very good way to keep your hands warm. Very technical, and non-critical. What does non-critical mean? Let's say you do want to write some code. So take some tasks that are not in the critical path for deployment, because nobody wants to be on the team when they can't talk to their manager because their manager is busy writing the feature, shipping the feature. That's a bottleneck. We had that not long ago at the company that I work at. There was somebody who wanted to do it all. So was also a manager of a big team, also writing critical features. He was a great iOS developer, great manager, can't do both at once. It was very hard. His team was frustrated, he was frustrated, not very good. So at the conference I was at a couple weeks ago, so there's a guy named Oren Ellenbogen. He is the VP of R&D at a company called Forder. And he actually gave a very interesting talk about how engineering managers can keep their skills sharp. And he advocated for something that he called the archaeologist approach, where he suggested that people, instead of learning how to use a technology, because we can all read a tutorial and figure out how to use a technology, but why was this technology created? What problems does it solve? What existed beforehand? You know, all kinds of questions like that to know, you know, where it came from. And that really sharpens your critical skills and is able to give you a broader picture of the technology that you're looking into, as opposed to just learning how to write a function in async await. Why did async await even come? All right, well, it's time for summary. So to summarize, I would like to review a little bit what we spoke about. We spoke about what hands-on management is and what it isn't, reasons why people become hands-on managers, reason why company wants a hands-on manager, if it makes sense, if it doesn't make sense, sometimes it does. But when you go to this question, you want it all, like I did, I really did. Oh well, it doesn't work like that, because at the end of the day, if you think about it, there's 3 pillars, all right? We've got 3 pillars. We have the development, we have management, and we have yourself. So you can be a great developer at the same time as being a great manager maybe, but then you have no time yourself. It's always a trade-off, and I hope that I gave you a little insight here to help you make the right choices. So I want to thank you all very much. And one of the things that Jeremy said yesterday is embrace limitations. I have a severe graphical design limitation, so thank you to all people who make free things like templates and pictures. And yeah, ready for questions. Nope.
Marco, can you turn it on?
Yeah.
Awesome. I really appreciate the talk. I've had great relationships with my engineering managers in the past, and you mentioned to be an engineering manager, you have to love people and probably socializing. But can you talk about the loneliness factor once you change from being an IC and socializing on your team to becoming a manager? Because I feel like you can't socialize in the same way with the same group.
I very much appreciate that question, and I felt it very sharply myself now when I came into my new position, because before I was parallel with 3 other engineering managers, so at least I had my own cohort of people who were doing the same things, and we could discuss the same kind of issues, because you can't always discuss everything with your team. And then I'm up at the next level, and guess what? There's nobody parallel to me. Very lonely. So what I have found useful for me, and I guess it's also easy for me because I'm a sociable person. It's like, wait a minute, I have no peers. Time to make peers. So that's what I actually did. I contacted somebody who was parallel to me, but in another country, still in our company, but the same position of me in Santa Clara. So I've got a good relationship with him and other people at different levels of the company that were higher up in order to make my own cohort. Now, if I didn't have those options available in my company, I would have looked outside of my company at friends, at other companies, because for me personally, I found that having a support system and you know, people that you could discuss similar issues with was very important. We've had the unique challenge of the engineering managers who just became engineering managers in our company. We're all in, except for one, in the team that they became managers of. So there's also that awkwardness of, hey, I was your buddy, we did lunch together, all of a sudden, you're not doing your things on time. You know, it's hard for them to make that switch, and you need a lot of support.
Thank you.
Any other question? Then I'd say, oh, there's one more, and it's the last one.
Yeah, thank you. It was a really good talk, and I really like the distinction you make between leadership and management. So in towards the end, you're talking about how you can still stay involved technically, code review, architecture decisions. And I wonder, do you think that might be overstepping the boundary, given that you're no longer being a leader as a developer, rather you're, people managing?
Yes, okay, great question. So as an engineering manager, I would not expect that they are necessarily the strongest development in the team. And oftentimes it's not. The manager is not necessarily the most technical, and you're supposed to rely on your team to do their work. When I did code review as an engineering manager, the only time I would comment is if it was something that I didn't understand. I wasn't approving or disapproving. I was like, explain to me, for me to learn, not to critique their code. Even now, as I've stepped higher and I'm a little bit scared of heights and I'm wondering, where are my people? Where's my code? I still read code. I admit I only read the iOS pull requests. Sorry, Android developers. And just for learning. Just for learning. So I'm assuming that your question means overstepping my bounds as opposed to saying, hey, I'm going to comment or I'm going to approve or disapprove. I don't do that.
Right, but especially as it pertains to like architectural decisions as
Yes.
well.
So architectural decisions, I think you need to trust your people. Unless they are going to do something really terrible that's going to cost a lot of money, I think you should let people fail. And then afterwards, hey, what could we have done differently, depending on how painful that failure is going to be. If it's a little bounce of wheels on the ground as opposed to crashing and burning. So you need to sometimes be able to make that distinction.
All right. Thank you, Leah.